When we talk about employment opportunities for people with disability, we need to think about the expertise that living with disability on a day-to-day basis actually gives people. You can't learn in a degree about disability what it is like to live with a disability. I'm an NDIS, but I was born with cerebral palsy. I've always been someone who has made a point of being really connected to mainstream society. Other people with disabilities are given the same opportunity that I have to participate meaningfully and fully in everyday life. Living with disability on a day-to-day basis actually gives people. You can't learn in a degree about disability. We need to change the way we think about disability.
Welcome, Zane. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Deb. Lovely to meet you.
Nice to see you, and so glad to be sitting today here and having these conversations. And I know before the camera turned on, we had a good conversation around what you've been doing. But for the audience, if you can just talk about not what you're doing right now, but your story, the genesis.
Yeah, well, obviously one of the key points to start with is that I'm an NDIS participant.
Mm-hmm.
I was born with cerebral palsy as a result of a brain hemorrhage that I had around about the time of my birth. But I've always been someone who has made a point of being really connected to mainstream society and mainstream communities, and from a very early part of my life I've remained determined to ensure that other people with disabilities are given the same opportunity that I have to participate meaningfully and fully in everyday life.
Mm-hmm. Could you talk more on your younger days in life and how was growing up in the communities and going to school, and how was that experience for you?
Well, it's a great question. I was born in a small country town called Ararat in Western Victoria, and as a very young man and as a family, we found it very difficult to access therapy services without travelling an hour and a half to Ballarat in order to access those services. So by the time I reached school age, we decided to move to Geelong, where those services were more readily available and more sort of commonplace. So at that point, we decided that I was going to attend mainstream education, which I did.
Which year was that?
Sorry?
From which year? Mainstream education?
So I started school in 1987.
Okay.
And went all the way through, completed my VCE and did half of a law degree.
Congrats.
Before I decided to take up a couple of work opportunities, and the money appealed to me more than the degree did, so I moved on. But I think, talking about that early part of my life, mainstream education, for one, did not have the same level of support, the same level of infrastructure to support a young person with a disability the way that we do today, through the opportunity that the NDIS and the other services that we now have in the community provide. So I think we are moving forward, and we have moved a long way forward in the last 25 or 30 years. So.
Very powerful. And before we come back to your adult life, as you talked about your education in the mainstream, and a Royal Commission recommendations around education and was fairly divided in terms of having mainstream and special eds or only one format of schooling. In your experience, and what have you observed from your life, what do you think a good education system should look like?
I believe that every person should be able to access mainstream services. because simply, no matter what the service is, whether it be education, whether it be transport, whether it be healthcare, all of those services should be able to make the necessary adjustments to accommodate people regardless of their limitations and abilities. That's incumbent on us as a community. So personally, I'm supportive of anything that doesn't lead to segregation of different groups of people, because I just think that as a community, we have to move beyond that. We have to start having conversations about universal access.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing those views. And post your schooling, and then how was that the law degree for you? And how was that experience? And was it a uni format? Was it what kind of education format was that?
Yeah. So my university studies I did at Deakin University in Geelong. As I said, I didn't complete the degree, but that was a personal choice thing. I found the study very interesting, and I really appreciated the opportunity. But as a young man, you sort of, you get the opportunity to make some money and get some collateral behind you, and it's very appealing. I think we could all relate to that. But I think, there are things that could have been better in terms of support. There's a lot of good support in education systems for people with disability, but they don't always consider logistical issues.
Yeah.
For example, when I was doing exams, I could get access to a note taker through the university, and they would scribe for me. But it didn't necessarily consider the extra time it would actually take me to do the coursework throughout the semester. So I found the timelines, somewhat of a challenge, because there were things that couldn't be shifted. So I think when we think about providing educational opportunities and work opportunities for people with disability, we have to think differently about how we provide those things. And as I said before, really, what adjustments are possible. Don't just do the bare minimum that is required, but think about how much more supportive we could be if we did something differently.
Very much. And I think you said very rightly, and to join the education and the work, as education is typically being seen as a stepping stone, which has worked with you in terms of opening the doors for employment opportunities, with the rightful opportunities from education to the work. And what do you think? And as you said, universal access on education, so that would support longer term employment creation and workforce. What do you feel about that linkage?
Well, absolutely. But I think the other part of providing long-term employment opportunities for people with disability is to understand that not everything, with no disrespect to formal education pathways, not everything is about pieces of paper. Life experience is so important, and I think when we talk about employment opportunities for people with disability, we need to think about the expertise that living with disability on a day-to-day basis actually gives people. You can't learn in a degree about disability what it is like to live with a disability. You can't get a full understanding of the things that are different, the things that are the same, the things that need to change simply by reading about it in a textbook.
Yeah, and the experience of lived experience and learning through experience is very different than learning through academics. But I think both has a role to play. And how was your first transition from studying a degree and then first workplace, and then what was that like, and how did you took it on, and what was the experience?
I'm a much better employee 15 years down the track than what I was when I started. I think the reality for every person, whether or not they have a disability, is that we all need to learn how to work,
Yeah.
you know. And you learn part of that through the education that you do, but you really only learn it by going to work and working with others and learning from your colleagues and being given opportunities. And I think, you know, today when I think about the way that I work, the way that I collaborate, the way that I influence others and have an impact, I'm a far better employee in 2024 than I was in 2003, 4 or 5, put it that way.
Zane, we were talking about your experience through your, you know, across the 2 decades of your working life and career, and you have seen a transition and in career growth, you know, across the years. And in this career growth, what do you think was one key thread which worked across so that you got a consistent career growth happening in your work experience?
I think, and I don't want to sound like a broken record here, Dev, but I think one of the key decisions that I made early on in my working life was to start working in the disability sector.
Okay.
One of the things about the disability sector is that it has, by definition of what it does and who it services, it has an inclusive mindset, you know. As you've said many times, you don't have to convince the disability sector that I'm employable, you know. So that was a definitive moment. And then in terms of career growth, it's really about being given opportunities. People appreciating my skill set and appreciating my expertise. When we were speaking earlier, I said one of the things I think we need to think differently about as a broader community is that living with disability on a day-to-day basis is in itself expertise. And you can't get it any other way. And thankfully, I had some fantastic managers who shared that philosophy with me and have backed me in over the last 11 years since I've been at Scope. And the organisation is one that's really committed to creating meaningful employment opportunities for people with disability, but also in senior roles and decision-making roles. That's part of our DNA. And therefore, you know, I think, yes, there is an education piece for the broader community, but it's also about understanding the benefits of employing people with disability. One comes down to that expertise that you can't get through, you know, people without disability, because you just don't get the same lived experience. But there are other things, you know. It's well documented in documents all over the world that people with disabilities are, in fact, when they are given employment, are more productive, they have less sick days, they are valuable colleagues to the people they work with. I mean, I could go on and on and on about that, but the trick is to provide the right infrastructure. And what I really want to see is other organisations that aren't necessarily organisations that are disability service providers, but organisations right across the community, start to recognise that an educator is an educator, regardless of whether or not they have a disability. You know, a driver is a driver, regardless of whether or not they have a disability. A workforce strategy lead, such as myself, is a workforce strategy lead. A person's disability is just, to me, an added skill set that should be tapped into. So we need to change the way we think about disability and start looking at it as an addition to our toolbox rather than this thing that is a burden or takes ability away.
Very powerful. Thank you for sharing that. It's very powerful to hear that part of your vision and purpose. And then I also want to delve more on your individual purpose. That, as you have transformed in your career, what has your purpose evolved, and then what does your purpose look like in the coming years?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I haven't always been, as an individual, as comfortable in my own skin as I am today. I haven't always been comfortable to be a person with a disability. And I think part of my journey has been to develop that mindset of inclusion that we've spoken about today. Because at one point, as a young man, I remember thinking, well, I want to be an AFL footballer. I want to play football. And then one day I realised I wasn't going to be an AFL footballer. And then I thought I was going to be a football coach because I thought I still know a lot about the game. And I can impart that onto young men, which I have done in my own life. And I just think that, my philosophy is, and I would say this to any person regardless of any disability or limitation that they may have, but also, any other person without disability, the thing you have to do more than anything else is believe in yourself. Because if you believe in yourself, and if you attack your own life with conviction, that is what is going to sell you to a prospective employer, to a prospective organisation that you want to connect with. And the other thing is, you need to be a really good listener, It wasn't my disability that taught me to accept myself as a disability. It's the people that I've worked with for the last 15 years, many of whom have disabilities. Listening to their stories every day, understanding how the people that I ultimately work for, that is the clients of Scope, understanding how they live their lives. What's important to them? What are the things that they really want? Hearing that story has changed my thinking. They are the ones that year by year have really built the version of me that you see today. I couldn't be where I am today without the impact that other people with disability have had on me. And that is an opportunity that anyone in the community can tap into.
I can say that you're very self-aware and a humble man. Very powerful. And delving into that thought further, you talked about, your intention is to not just people, disability organizations to employ people with disabilities. Your intention is to the larger corporate world, the larger, workplaces should start employing people with disabilities. And how do we bridge that gap of, first of all, accepting or understanding that, you should only look at the skill sets, not the disabilities or ability. You look at the skill sets, if they fit that skill criteria, you should be able to have them as part of your workforce. So how do we bridge that piece of the gap, and then what more things can be done to just, transition the rest of Australia workplaces to employ people with disabilities?
Well, for about 15 years, ever since I've been working for Scope, and as a disability educator way back in the day, one of the things that I always said was that a disability is nothing but a glorified limitation. Right? Everybody has limitations. Everybody has things they're good at, things they're not so good at. And everybody has particular skills and abilities, right? So I would plead with the broader community and really compel the broader community to sort of, when we think about employing people, right, understand that the person making that decision has limitations, right? And so part of it is about mindset. But how would they feel if I said to them, no, well, because of your limitation, we won't employ you, right? It's very easy to do that when it's a person with a disability. But it's not so easy to do if you're just an able-bodied person without a disability who isn't a good fit, you know? They have to work much harder to prove that, you know, if you know what I mean. And so I think, you know, it is incumbent on society to, instead of asking, why should I provide an opportunity to a person with a disability, and instead of thinking about the barriers, think about what that person is going to bring into your organisation, what that person is going to bring into your club, whoever you are, you know. Even, I mean, if we think about mainstream society for a minute, I still walk down the streets and there are still shops that I can't get into, you know. I went to a chicken shop for lunch today and I couldn't get in the front door. That's unacceptable. So if you're looking for ways to employ people with disability, you should start with asking the question, how can we improve access? And I will guarantee you, you will automatically become a more accessible and more inclusive environment if you give a person with a disability a job. It will happen.
I think you should be given the megaphone. You should be given the megaphone to talk to the rest of Australia about why we should employ people with disabilities and what should they be doing. Because, you know, the word choice and control comes a lot, you know, in NDIS conversation and broad, you know, inclusion conversation. So one part of your life is employment and work, and then one part of your life is living independently. So that's one of the
That's right.
So how has your journey in your living space being, you know, evolved in the last few decades?
Well, it's funny, for a very large part of my life I lived at home with my mum and dad and my younger sister. And I believed for a very long time that my sister would probably spend most of her adult life being my primary carer. That's what I honestly believed. I didn't think I'd ever get married. I didn't think I'd ever have children. I didn't think I'd be presented with those opportunities. And I was wrong about all those things. You know, I'm a husband and a father. But one of the things I'd like to say on, you know, my journey of choice and control is I make no bones about knowing that I'm one of the lucky ones, you know. I've never, and I mean this with no disrespect to people who have had a different journey, but I've never had to live in supported accommodation, you know. I've never lived in a group home. I have friends that do. I work with people that do. And some of those experiences are fantastic, right? So let's not bear any bones about that. But I have always, as I said right at the start, I've always made a point of trying to be mainstream. And because I honestly believe that it's not my fault that I have a disability. And it's not anyone's fault. But it is incumbent upon society to include me, right? So, when I was 27, I moved out of the family home. I was working almost full-time at that stage for another organisation. So I got a loan, my mum and dad went guarantor, and I bought a unit. And I started living as a single man. And I had, support workers come in to help me with personal care and help me get in and out of bed. Still do. And what I would say is, those people, right, the relationship between a person with disability and their support staff is one of the most important relationships that exists in society. Mm-hmm. Because, I say I live independently, and that's how I feel about it. Mm-hmm. But I feel that way because I have choice and control. Mm-hmm. I have choice and control over who works with me, mm-hmm. who works for me, how they work, when they work, why they work. Mm-hmm. And that support is provided through the NDIS, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I'm really, really conscious of mm-hmm. is that with all of the change going on in the NDIS, individual choice and control and the absolute right of people with disability to make decisions about their own lives must be preserved. Mm-hmm. Yes, there are risks. Yes, there are dodgy providers. Sometimes things go wrong, right? But can you tell me anything in your life where everything goes perfectly all the time? It's just the same as a person with disability. Sometimes we try things and we fall down. Yeah. And we get up again and we learn from the experience and we do things differently. Mm-hmm. But we can't be so risk averse that we don't give people the opportunity to try things and to make choices. I've always said that. Mm-hmm. But we need to make sure that everybody gets that opportunity.
Very powerful. Leading into from that part of your finishing commentary on that every person should have the choice, the right of to make the choice. And as you hinted about, what changes being coming, and one of the conversations are happening is to have, risk adjusted and then regulated at a different level to regulate all providers, all service providers as registered providers, but different level of regulations will be applied to different set of regulated providers in the NDIS system. So is that what you were hinting, or do you want to talk more on that?
Well, I've looked hard at that. And I'm supportive of that in principle, but by the same token, I've heard a lot of commentary from a lot of my peers in the community who aren't necessarily rapt about the fact that, every one of their providers will have to be a registered provider and will have to, meet certain criteria. And I think the way that I would like us to progress with that is to have individual conversations mm-hmm. with individuals mm-hmm. and with their service providers mm-hmm. to work out, one, what's different about your relationship? How does your relationship work now in ways that it might not be able to work mm-hmm. if you have to be a registered provider? Like I'm really conscious that, some of my support workers, one in particular, isn't a registered provider. Mm-hmm. But if they were, and they work for an agency, I wouldn't be able to turn up to work in the same way that I do every day now, because there are rules that agencies have mm-hmm. about how many hours a person can work mm-hmm. without a break, and we still have those rules, but we decide what they are. We decide, we know we're going to factor in break times, mm-hmm. but that's my decision, or it's my support worker's decision. It's not the decision of some guy in a big corporate office at a major corporation who says, well, you've got to have a break now.
And as you rightly pointed that relationship is very critical in the disability ecosystem to function well. The most important relationship is the relationship of this person with disability and their care worker. And
Absolutely.
And if that has, as you said, that you have to go through an agency system or an agency organization to provide care worker for you, you might not get the same outcome you are getting at this stage.
Well, the simple fact of the matter is that right now I can employ a person. Will I be able to employ a person if all of the recommendations are accepted? I don't know. But certainly it's not the way it reads. And so when I make the comments that I make about choice and control, those are the things that make a really big difference. I can participate in society because of the supports that I receive. And the NDIS is the very thing that has made that possible, right? So if the way in which that works changes, then my ability to work as I do, with the level of decision-making power that I have, might change as well. So I think we need to, and in a wide range of ways, like not only for people in work situations like mine, but I've heard some very, very strong people, come out and say, well, hang on, this in essence means that an agency gets to decide whether they can find a carer to put me to bed at the time I want to go to bed at. And if I can't, then they make the decision, not me. So I think, when we look at all of the recommendations as a whole, I think it's a great package. But we'd better make sure that there's a level of consultation and co-design that government has committed to. Because if they don't, it won't work. And what we don't want to do is go back to the models that we had before we had the NDIS. And I feel that is what some people fear will come from this review.
And everything as you said, life has been a journey. And it's a journey and learning, and you get up and fall and learn and evolve. So does many systems will do, and as an organization. So what do you feel, my concluding question to you is, the colloquial word we use in Australia, are we there yet? And from that colloquial language, are we there yet on a journey to inclusive and fair Australia?
No, we're not. And if I can be so bold, I will say we never will be. We will never be there because it's a continuous improvement thing. We can always be better. We're better now than we were 30 years ago. We'll be better in 5 years than we are today. We'll be better in 25 years than we are today. As long as the original intent of the NDIS is retained. And that original intent is choice, control, and flexibility for people with disabilities and the right to live an ordinary life.
Very well. Thank you. It's an honour to have this conversation, and so glad for the opportunity to have this conversation with you. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dev.